Welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Soebbing. I'm wearing my National Quilt Museum shirt today because today I'm going to show you how to make my block design from the National Quilt Museum Block of the Month. And this is the August 2018 Block of the Month. I was really honored when they asked me to design a block based on their Vincent van Gogh exhibit for the Cherrywood Challenge. I kind of got my start in the quilting world by designing Block of the Month, so this is really fun just to do one block that's going to be part of a whole quilt. If you would like to join, it's completely free. Just search for the National Quilt Museum Block of the Month on Facebook. They have a private group that you can join, and if you don't have Facebook, don't worry, there are other ways to get the block. But if you join the group, it's really fun because everybody posts pictures of what they're working on, and you can kind of get a taste of what other people are doing. It's just really fun community atmosphere, which is what quilting is all about. So my block is going to be completely applique, and I'm going to show you how to do fusible applique because that's my favorite way to do it when I want something fast. I do hand applique occasionally, but the vast majority of the time I do fusible because it's really quick and you can get great results and they just turn out really fun. So I'm going to use the Vincent van Gogh fabrics that were created for the 2017 challenge. And I'm also using a little bit of the one from the year before with the Cherrywood challenge for the Lion King because these yellows work really great for the stars and the Starry Night. So obviously it would be really intense to create the entire Starry Night in one little block. So what I did was I got a little section of the top corner where the steeple comes out and then there's a nice swirl going through. So that's what we're going to recreate with the patterns. We don't have the Cherrywood batiks. You have to get that from their website, but we'll have a link to it in the description below and in the blog post along with this. But everything else to make this we have at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. So we have this really cool Heat and Bond Easy Print Light. So what you can do is I've created two versions of this. If you are doing the regular applique style by hand, you can get it where it is not reversed, it is just the way it looks. But I've also created reversible templates, so you can print it off, everything's already reversed, so that way when we put it together, everything is going the right direction. That'll make more sense if you haven't done fusible applique before in just a minute. But you can just feed these through your printer, you don't have to trace anything off, it makes it really great. And I'm gonna quilt mine here too. Instead of doing the entire quilt, I'm just gonna do this as a one little mini quilt. And so I'm gonna use my machiner's quilting gloves for that. And I have pulled some Aurifil threads that match really well for this. This is a 50 weight. I'm going to be using color 2730. It's a nice medium blue. Color 2783, which is a darker blue. I'm going to be using color 2692. This is a great one to just have in your stash because it's black. You can use it for a lot of things. And for the yellow bits, I'm going to be using color 1135. And we have all of those at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com as well as everything else you need to make this quilt. Except the Cherrywood. You got to go to them for that, but we'll have a link to it. They're really pretty. They are hand dyed and they have a suede look. So they're really fun. They're going to look great for this block. Let's get started. So to make this even easier, I use the Heat and Bond Easy Print Light. So this is the same Heat and Bond that you have used in folded packs or on a roll, but these will go straight through your printer. So you're able to take the templates that I created, they're already in reverse. You can just feed them through your printer and then you're ready to cut. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out these pieces and then I'm going to window them. And I'm going to show you what that means. So let's start with this little circle. I want to make sure that I'm leaving about a 1/4 inch or so around the edges of those lines. That'll give that glue something to hold on to until I can cut it to size, and it'll ensure that your glue is right up to the edge of your pieces. Now I want to make sure that I cut out this inside too, and what that will do is it will make sure that my fabric is still flexible. So I'm going to leave about a 1/4 inch along the inside of the fusible, and then the rest of it will be removed so there won't be any hard stiff glue underneath. It'll just be nice soft flexible fusible or fabric, not fusible. So to do that, what I do is I fold it in half. I give it a little trim there so I can get my scissors inside. Cut right about to the edge there, and then very carefully using my really sharp scissors. Embroidery scissors also work really nice for this. I'm just going to go around that inside so that I've got about 1/4 inch on the outside and 1/4 inch on the inside, and that's how you window. So go ahead and cut out the rest of your pieces. And one other thing that you should note is, like, for example, this large river piece, this is going to go from the side of the block to the side of the block. Also, piece 2, these 2 straight edges are on a corner of a block, and piece 3, this straight edge is on the corner of a block. So you want to make sure that you're also including your seam allowance in that. So what I mean is we have a nice 1/4 inch going around the sides here that we're going to leave intact, because I want to make sure that that's going to be sitting off of the side of the block rather than have it end too far and then it might poke out through your seam allowance. You don't want that to happen. So that'll make more sense when we put it together in the next step. But go ahead and cut everything out, making sure you leave 1/4 inch of the fusible on the outside and on the inside so we can window. For the bigger pieces, it's a lot easier to go in with your large shears. Now for this piece, we just have our spindle, but then we have a lot of open space. Don't throw this away. We're going to use it to create the waves in our little Starry Night Milky Way. So when you do fusible applique, you always want to fuse to the wrong side of the fabric. These Cherrywood solids are, you don't have to worry about that. There's no right or wrong. So you can just give it a good press. You want to make sure all the wrinkles are out before you do this, or there will be a wrinkle forever. I'm going to do my little stars first. So when you do this, your fabric kind of looks like Swiss cheese. So you kind of want to cluster them together. So that way you use as little as possible. And then you have more for another project someday. But all you have to do is just lay it down and then go over it with the iron. And it sticks. So I'm going to let this cool down just a little bit before I start cutting on that line. I want it to be completely cool, and right now it's still really warm. But what I am going to do is I'm going to go ahead and trim this off now, so that way I'm not working with as big a piece. All right, so I'm just going to set this off to the side to cool, and we'll do the next color. So that was the lightest yellow from the Lion King one. And I'm doing the darkest blue as my background for my Starry Night. And I'm doing this dark black, navy, probably depends on what light it is, for my background of my steeple that's coming up. So since this is so long, I just want to make sure it's laid nice and flat. You can see I didn't trim in the middle here because it's really tiny in there, and so you don't really have a full 1/4 inch to work with. So I'm actually going to start there and then just drag my iron out and then come down the other way. Go over it a couple more times. And that's good. Just like the other one, I'm going to go ahead and trim this out so that I'm dealing with smaller pieces and set it to the side. So I'm going to use my medium blue for my river of Milky Way, and then also the little corner that is about the same consistency in the actual painting. So I'm going to start with my little piece. That one's going to be easier to get down. Just going to go around that curve and then get that corner down. I'm going to go ahead just to use less fabric. Now for this big one, I'm just going to start at the corner and drag my iron across, making sure everything stays nice and straight as I go. Do this side a little bit. With these big pieces, it can get a little wonky on you, so you just have to take your time and be careful with them. Well, once you have them down, just go ahead and give it another good press. You can see I left a lot of extra space here. That's because on both of these sides, it's going to be going over the seam allowance. I want to have plenty to work with. This is that extra piece that was left after the spindle. I'm going to put the entire bit of it to the fabric, and we're actually going to do something really cool with this to have it go through that Milky Way to create some really cool swirl effect. So I'm just going to fuse that whole piece down and then cut around it again as well. Everything has cooled really nicely, so now I'm going to go through and I'm going to cut on the printed line so that I get a nice neat shape out of this. And you're going to do that all for all of your pieces. For your spindle, you want to make sure you leave some extra space at the bottom because this is going to be going into the seam allowance. All right, I'm just leaving about a 1/4 inch or so at the bottom beyond where that line is so that I've got something to stick to that seam allowance. Leaving about a 1/4 inch on both sides of this one as well for that seam allowance. We're gonna wait on trimming this one for just a minute till you can see what we're gonna do with it. So I've already cut my background square to the size of the block with the seam allowances. And my next thing to do is to add piece 1, which is this wavy one. I like to keep my papers on until the last minute. So I'm just going to pull this off. You can kind of see on camera it's a little bit darker, that's where the glue is. So now I'm going to arrange this so that it is going across the block. Start up here in the corner, get that down. Get this bottom corner as well. And then I'm going to get the rest of that river secured down. Kind of want to go over it a few times just to make sure that that is nice and secure. I'm also going to go ahead and do my bottom corner at this time. And this wouldn't hold it forever, but it will hold it until you can get everything stitched down, and it forms a nice seal on your fabric so that it's not going to fray as it is used. Mine's just going to be a little wall hanging, so it's not going to really be used, but it's really nice and flexible underneath, as opposed to feeling that glue, which I can definitely feel some thickness on the edge there, but it's only in that last 1/4 inch. So this is a really great way to make it work. So now we're going to create some rivers to come through here to sort of recreate that look of the swirly Milky Way type thing. And that is where this fabric comes into play. So what you want to do is you want to cut this on the bias. When you cut it on the bias, you can manipulate it as it's going through. And I'm not really going to, I guess, have a plan. Is probably the best way to do this. This is where you can have the most sort of freedom. I really am just going to cut some ribbons through here. There'll be different lengths and widths, and we'll just kind of see how it goes. Okay, well that is a good start. We're going to start with these and see how I like it and if we need to do any more. I think for these top ones, I'm going to go ahead and trim it so that it comes to a point. That way, if it ends at what seems like kind of an odd angle, it won't be like a square. It'll be like a river just ending. So we'll start with this. I may add some more in a minute. So I'm turning it so it's going away from me just because I know I'm going to have an easier time pressing that way. I'm just going to start with the little one. Let's see, this one actually looks pretty good right there. I did go ahead and leave one side nice and square, so I'm going to try and line those up with the edges of the block and kind of see how it goes, but if I want to trim it down later, that's totally fine too. So I'm gonna start by anchoring my bottom. And this one, I kind of like the way it's curving, so I'm just gonna leave it be and fuse that down. Make sure I get that tip really well. So I like the way this one's going, but I don't like how this is coming to an abrupt end over here. So I'm going to just trim it in just arbitrarily so that it comes to more of a natural curvy point at the bottom. Now here's where this can get real fun. So let's say I'm not digging the way this is curving. Because we've cut it on the bias, I can curve it around any which way I want. And it will stay in that place. It works, it curves really well if you have really thin strips. The bigger ones are a little bit harder to curve, but I was able to move that around and I'm getting some really cool swirls. I think for the next one, I'm gonna flip it around and come the other way and see how that goes. Or maybe we'll start down here. That could be fun. Let's do it. Yeah, let's do it this way. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to then come this way. I'm not digging how this is ending either, so I'm gonna give that just a little bit smoother curve. And I'm going to make it a little bit smaller up here as well, so it's a little bit easier to manipulate. But you can really have a lot of fun with this, and just your imagination is your limit, basically. If you can think of it, you can make it happen. Okay, so I'm liking how this is laying, but obviously it's coming across here more than I want it to. So what I'm gonna do is kind of turn it towards me and kind of follow that line down. And I may go in there and, actually let's just do this. Let's just trim it in easier. And then it'll be like it's just coming to a point somewhere. Okay. Trying to line it up so it's gonna come straight to that edge and be right on top of it. Takes a little bit of fussing, but it's worth it. All right, so I am really happy with how these waves are turning out. So now I'm gonna add the rest of the pieces, starting with my spindle. So this is that iconic spindle coming up in the Starry Night. So we're gonna place that in place. All right, I kind of like where that's at because I can kind of see this little bit coming out there. It's gonna probably be a pain to quilt like that, but that's okay. We'll make it work. It's gonna be worth it. Really get that down there, nice. I'm gonna make sure I've got a good 1/4 inch seam. So this spindle is gonna be really close to the edge where my binding is, but that's okay, it'll look good. So next up is the bigger circle, and it kind of fits in the crook right there. Add some color to what is otherwise a very dark night. See a nice little star in the sky. This one kind of overlaps down here. I'm actually gonna go ahead, I don't really love how this all came together down here, so I'm just gonna cover it up. So that's kind of the beauty of this. If you don't kind of love how something worked out, just cover it up with another piece. No one will ever know. All right, now this last piece is going to actually come off of the top like that. So what I wanna do is kind of decide how I like it. Keep in mind, you're gonna have about a 1/4 inch seam, so maybe I wanna bring it down just a little bit more. And I'm gonna go ahead and give it a trim while it's actually on the board. Make sure you don't trim your block low, but it'll give me a nice guide of where everything should be. Now I can reline it up with that top. And that's it, the block is done. At this point, if you're gonna do it in a traditional quilt, I would recommend that you anchor down all of these pieces with some sort of decorative stitch. Satin stitch is really popular. I prefer the buttonhole stitch. I'm gonna go ahead and quilt this immediately and just sort of treat it as a mini. So I'm gonna skip that because I really just want the texture of the quilting to come through. I don't want to see buttonhole. So I'm just going to stitch everything down with the actual quilting rather than do a decorative stitch first. So I'm gonna go straight over, get my machine set up to do free motion quilting, and then we'll be back and I'll show you how I'm gonna quilt this. Of course, it's my own personal preference. You guys can do whatever you wanna do. So I'm gonna kind of give you an idea of how I'm using these thread colors. The black, number 2692, is what I'm going to use in the steeple. I'm going to use the yellow, pretty obviously, number 1135 in all of the yellow stars. I'm using the lighter blue, number 2730 in all of these blue swirls. And then I'm using this darker blue, number 2783 in all of the background. And these are both a little bit darker, and I'm doing that on purpose because I want to see the texture. If you are a new quilter and you don't want to see your thread, you may want to get something that is the same shade or a little bit lighter, but I've been doing this a little bit. I want to see my texture. I think this is going to be a really fun one to do. So I do the vast majority of my quilting on my long arm, but for pieces this small, I find I can actually do a lot better and I have a lot more control on my home sewing machine. I've already set my tension and I'm using the same thread in the top and the bobbin. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do a stitch all the way around the edges, so that way it stays nice and square as I'm quilting on the inside. I also have on my machiner's quilting gloves, and they're great because they have little grippies on the fingers that help me hold this and move it around real easily without a lot of wrist strain. And also, they're really lightweight, so it's actually pretty hot right now. It's summertime as I'm filming this, but I'm not getting overheated because of the gloves. I could have also done this with a walking foot, but I'm just trying to eliminate changing feet. So the first part I'm going to quilt is going to be all of this background. It takes up the most real estate, so it's going to lock everything in place and keep it nice and stable as I'm working. But also, I really think of swirls when I think of Starry Night. So that's what I'm going to do in here, is create some really great fun swirls. I'm going to try to break thread as little as possible, so when I can travel around the edge of this, I'm going to, and we'll just see how it goes. One other thing to keep in mind when you are quilting is you can only quilt what fits in between your hands. So do not try to get the whole width of your block in one swoop. Just do this with your hands, move it around, do whatever you need to do, and then when you can go no further, stop with your needle down, reposition your hands, and do that area. All right, so I've secured my threads in place and I pulled my bobbin thread to the top so that doesn't make a mess. And I'm starting in the crook of where my spindle is coming out. And I'm just gonna start creating random, not like full swirls like I would do as an all over design, but just big wavy lines that eventually swirl. So we'll see how that goes. When you are doing free motion, you control your stitch width and your speed. And so you kind of have to hit that rhythm on your own and get used to it. I've done this a lot, so it probably sounds very steady. But it's just because I've done this a time or two before, and I've kind of figured out how I want that to go. All right, so I'm kind of coming up and over a swirl. I'm going to create another one over here. And I need to reposition my hands, but I'm trying to get to the point because then it's going to be less obvious that I have changed directions. So I can reposition my hands now, and now I can come out that swirl and create some new ones. Got a little fast there. All right, so there are parts that could be better. This is a little looser than I would like, but I think it's gonna be fine with the overall. So now it's time to change thread. I think I'm gonna go with the black next. For this one, I'm just going to keep going up and down that steeple until we kind of meet in the center. For this part, I'm going to turn everything upside down, and then we'll work from the bottom of the steeple to the top and back up again, just because I find it easier to work that way when I am doing free motion quilting on my home sewing machine, but you just do whatever works for you. Now this is the first piece that really kind of needs to be outlined. So I'm gonna make sure that I also am outlining the edge just by stitching as close as I can to it as I get started here. All right, get those stitches anchored. All right, now I'm just gonna stitch as close as I can to this edge on the way up and then back down again. And then I can sort of echo that on the inside, which is my plan for this part. All right, I've got that stitch down. Now I'm just gonna keep echoing on the inside. All right, my steeple is now echoed down. It's really rough the way it actually looks in the painting. I really like how that turned out. So next I'm going to go to the blues. I'm gonna quilt all of this with the same thread, but I am gonna quilt these sections differently than the background sections. I'm gonna do much the same texture where I just kind of outline it and then go down the center and back again. All right, now I'm gonna outline the stitches and I'm just gonna go back and forth on them. I've flipped everything around so that way I can kind of see where I'm going. I find it's easier to do it when I can see that I'm coming forward rather than trying to predict where things are at behind me. Okay, now since this is such a small piece, I can flip it around and come back to me. I have to be a little bit careful because I'm going to travel along the outside of this star. I don't want to get blue in my yellow star. All right, flip it again and come back to me. Flip again. Okay, now here's the beauty of using the same thread for each one. Even though I just finished this one, I can go ahead and start on the next one, and I'm just gonna echo there too. But what I'm gonna do is I'm going to just stitch over around that circle. And then I can flip it around and I can outline this and I can keep echoing back and forth until I create that nice wave. And it'll have lots of great different textures we really need. All right, echo's done. Let's scooch it over a little bit. And then I'm just kind of keeping the edge of my foot even, kind of, with the stitch line that I just did. So for these circles, I'm just gonna quilt one really tight spiral coming in, and then I'm gonna break thread once I hit the center, and then we'll just keep going on the other ones. All right, I'm gonna start by outlining the entire piece. And then I'm gonna do just a really tight spiral, getting in a little bit further every time I go around. I'm not really concerned about it being a perfect circle. If I was, I have some templates that I could use. I just want to see the texture. Okay, I'm going to secure those threads. Break thread and move on to the next one. All right, so for this last one, I'm going to pretend that there's a whole spiral so I can have nice smooth circles as I go around, and I'm actually just going to continue quilting off into the batting. So So here it is. We have our Starry Night block. I really love how this turned out. I have quilted it to death, but I really like it. Like I said, I'm just going to use mine as a one-off little wall hanging, but you certainly could quilt it to death on your own quilt as well too. I use Quilter's Dream batting in here, so it's actually really still pretty drapable, even with that fusible in there and the really dense quilting. If you enjoyed this tutorial, make sure you subscribe to our channel and make sure you hit the bell so you get notifications. We're releasing new videos every week with new video tutorials. We have 2 going out this week because this is a bonus one, because normally our video tutorials go out on Monday. We have lots of original patterns over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com, and we have hundreds of tutorials over at quiltaddictsanonymous.com. So make sure you go check all that out. If you subscribe to emails over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com, we give you 10% off your first purchase, so you get that coupon code once you sign up. So if you're new and you've checked us out because of the National Quilt Museum Block of the Month, thanks for following along. We hope that you check out all the other great tips, tricks, and tutorials that we have as well. And until next time, happy quilting!